to the Mindset Michelle TV show. We're so excited to have you join us again for another fabulous show. We really appreciate all the wonderful feedback we get from all of the different people across the world about how much they're enjoying the show and how much these tips are making a difference in their life. And today is no exception. Today we have another fabulous guest coming all the way from Canada. Hello, Heather.
Hello.
It's so wonderful to have you on the show today. So for those of you that don't know Heather MacTaggart, Heather is the founder of Classroom Connections, which she started way back in 1997 as a lifelong educator and somebody that's very passionate about changing the way we do schooling. She's also got the programs Change It Up, Unschooling School, and it all has this theme around unlearning how we've been schooled or helping teachers and children learn new ways of thinking and new ways of schooling. But it's such a niche area, and it's such an area I'm passionate about as a trainer and educator as well. So Heather, please share with us, how did you come to be working in this field and be so passionate about changing how people learn?
Well, I think it's because from a very early age, I figured out that there was something wrong with the education system, because I knew I was fine, but the system started telling me that I was stupid at a very, very young age. And, by sort of 7 or 8 years old, they'd figured out there's something really wrong with this kid. She appears smart and she speaks well, but she won't read and she won't do math or the things she's supposed to do. And for whatever reason, I never bought into it. And so even though I struggled and despised school the whole way, I squeaked into university and then got straight A's. And if you told me at that time that I was going to spend a career in education, I would have said, you're nuts, because I don't even like teachers. Why would I do that? But when I had my own kids, I realized that many of the things that had happened to me that were wrong were still going on. And that very, very little had changed. We called things nicer by nicer names, but we were essentially doing the same old thing. So I had this crazy idea that I could start an organization that would be kind of an intermediary between the education system and then other groups like nonprofits, corporations, got different forms of government that wanted to have a positive impact, but didn't know how, and there was no way for them to do it. And I thought, okay, we can build great programs by getting other people to pay for them. And then in that way, let them look good, but also try to change what was going on.
Wow, what a wonderful explanation of the passion and what you're explaining around having that idea about, oh, why don't I try this, and then going out and doing it. And that's so wonderful to hear. And it leads me interestingly onto, well, when you understood that you were thinking differently or that you had a different way of looking at what you were being taught or schooled in, it must have had you feel, well, I have a different view on life. I have a different lens on these things. Mm-hmm. What then is your sense around what is success to you? Because you may have a different view on success then as well.
Success to me is impact. So what impact am I having? And, while I like things that money can buy and nice homes and, those things are all nice, but I don't believe that they're mutually exclusive. I believe in the abundance theory, and that is that we actually can have it all. But to me, honestly, the most important thing is impact. Is what I'm doing making a difference?
I really hear that, and I really hear, especially when with education, you can measure and you can see the results so quickly, in a sense, is what I'm saying, what I'm doing having an impact, and are people changing? Are they learning? Are they growing? And so people watching the show will be really interested then if when they're learning, like you were saying, you were struggling with school, you were struggling with this, what sort of tips do you have for people, especially now with, COVID and people changing jobs, if they perhaps feel like they're not as good at learning and want to build up that successful mindset of how can I learn more and grow more, because I also now need to do that to get new jobs? What sort of tips would you share with them?
Well, I think the main thing is to take charge yourself. and to think, okay, what is it that I want to do, and and then to figure out how am I going to go about that? Who do I get to help me and support me, but not kind of leave it to anybody else. I think that the secret is, in part of, what we talk about in both the kind of two initiatives that we have going on, is that the person who's learning needs to be at the center, and it needs to be the way that works for them. So, the most important thing in any learning situation is desire. Like, if you want to learn something, even if it's something you didn't think you liked before, if you want to learn it, you can figure out how to do that.
I wholeheartedly agree. Many organizations now spend lots and lots of money on things like the customer experience journey, or employee design, co-design, or co-collaboration in organizations. And there's this movement, if you like, towards the person being at the center of design of things. And very much like you're saying, if they have that desire to learn like yourself, you had a desire to do something and it didn't exist, so you went out and did it. And I think that that's one of the beauties of many of these Western countries that I know of, that if you have that desire, you can actually go out and create and do many things.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think that, most of the things that I've done, I just had this huge passion for it and wanted to do it. And I just went out and did it, even though I actually didn't know what I was doing. And, it hasn't all worked out perfectly, but by and large, it's worked out. And, you can't let people that say, well, that's not how you do this, and that's not what you should do, and you have to do this degree or this thing first. That the trial and error and figuring it out as you go is a very legit way to get something to happen.
And I love that part that you remind everybody about, of the, you don't always know how to do it when you start. And that's that learning how to learn again. And what do you think have been some of the key things that have helped you to learn how to learn, or learn differently?
Well, strangely enough, it was the fact that the system didn't work for me. So the, sit down, shut up, and do what you're told did not work for me. The linear, we're going to do this first and this second and this next. And, you have to learn this even if you don't like it. I was very interested in the things I was interested in, but not at all interested in the other things. And then when I realized, okay, I actually do want to go to university, so I'm going to have to figure out how to do some of this stuff. I had to figure out myself how it was that I learned. So I realized that I'm much better when I hear things. So I would read out a passage from a textbook or whatever it was, and then stand up and walk around the room and say it out loud like I was acting it. And then it would get into my head more. But nobody told me that. There was no, what learning strategies can we use? I just had to figure it out based on when there was something that I had decided I was going to learn. Sometimes you can decide to learn something just because you want to pass the test, or you want to, get the mark. It's not as easy as it would be if you wanted to learn it because you were so interested in it. And then that kind of learning, of course, is much easier.
Isn't it interesting? Because I do remember myself when studying, especially in younger years, and you had a lot of condensed information to remember, using different memory mnemonics and tricks, but also recognizing that the way that I learned was by writing everything down. And now all these years later, I've accepted that I'm a very visual person. And for me, that's the way of learning. So even when I go to like a networking event, it's quite funny. I know that unless I see a name tag, if somebody tells me their name, I'm not as likely to remember it unless I either say it back to them or make it, like with Michelle, I can say to people, Michelle, my bell, because that will help as a mnemonic, help them to remember it. Heather could be leather or something like that, just those memory tags and ways to help people remember, which also helps it to stick, because it's funny, like, you'll laugh and because, especially in those types of situations, if you're meeting people or if we talk about an interview situation where you've got 5 people around you and you're going, well, how am I going to remember? Write it down or do like I said, make a comment in each person's name. Oh, that's a lovely name, Rose, or that's a fantastic name, Charles. My dad's name is Charles. So it helps you to actually put those names and put that situation into your memory a lot stronger than just hearing it. And for many people, I know it goes in one ear and out the other. And what other suggestions in terms of learning? Like for me, writing things down really, really works. But what else have you seen really work for people?
Well, I mean, the thing is that it's different for every person. And that is one of the problems that we have in the Western education systems, and well, in most of the education system around the world, because it's almost entirely now based on the Western model, which is that everybody should do the same thing at the same time. There's certain ages where people should be doing things. And a lot of that is based on averages, which then satisfies nobody, because I've yet to see the average kid or the average person. That really, it's a myth. So, it's giving people the space and the time to explore what they're interested in and go after that. And in so doing, they will figure out how they learn.
That's a really interesting concept. Yeah. Giving them the space and the time to learn how they learn, and then teaching them in that way or helping them to learn in that way.
Yeah, well, in the education field, there's a word, metacognition. So it's learning about learning. But you can do that if you're given the space and the time. And you're always being told what to do and march to somebody else's drum, an idea of, the curriculum is so important. The curriculum is not important at all. What's important is learning about yourself, learning how to learn, and figuring out, how you're going to get things done and who you're going to be in this world. And then after you've got that down, you can learn any curriculum that comes along if you decide that's what you want.
It's an interesting concept, this whole very linear, very structured Western way of learning and studying. And I'm interested in your thoughts around, I have heard from others that this is to do with, it's actually from the 18th century, and it's to do with we were all essentially being trained for going into factories later. So it was all about squashing creativity, squashing differentness, so that we were all, in a sense, trained, like the school bell, this is when you start, this is when you stop, this is what you do at this point in time, what you do at that point in time, very much like if you're in a workplace. So what are your thoughts about that? Is that really, because I've never really studied it, but I just heard that theory. Is that really part of the evolution of how people are learning?
Absolutely. We did mass education for two reasons. The earlier version of it was so that people could read the Bible and know what to do. So they could read the Bible and follow the rules. So there was an element of religion that was involved in early schools. And then it was to train kids to go into the factory. So you need them to be able to read the instruction manual and do what they're told. So school is very much about training kids to do what they're told. Problem is, now we need creative thinkers. We need problem solvers. We need collaborators. We need people that are going to go way beyond what's around. But the problem is that education system has a hard time adjusting because it is hung on to this rigid factory-like structure. And, I've been in education for 25 years, and the conversations, we need to move into the 21st century. It's all the same stuff. We've moved this much. There are amazing teachers out there that when the doors are closed are doing very different things in their own classes. And there's some, pretty cool schools, but in the public system in general, it looks very much like it did when we were kids. And that's partly because it's hard for people within the system to let go of that structure.
Well, isn't that part as well of the fact that the teachers have never been out of the system themselves? So the teachers got taught in that way. They went and learned how to be teachers, and then they went back into the system. And with none of that life experience, not to judge it, but just to say, without any experience outside of that, that's all they've known as well.
It's very true. And for most teachers, the system worked for them. It's because if you're the kind of person that likes, just tell me how high the bar is and I'll jump. And I like a gold star and I like the pat on the back. And if you're a person that likes those things, then the system works, okay for you. I still would argue it doesn't help you find your passion, but you're going to succeed in the system. And so you'll feel all right. And, mostly that's the kind of people that teachers are. Now, it's not always. Sometimes people become a teacher because they hated the system. They want to go back and try to change it. And there are some that are just, just fantastic and love kids and figure it out and do an amazing job. So, it's not like we don't have really great teachers out there. We do. But a lot of the time, the system even gets in their way of truly putting the kid at the center and having the kid is the one who should be driving the bus. And the principles. So, we've got kind of two things going on right now where we've created a movement which we call unschooling school. And what that is saying is that school belongs to us, belongs to the taxpayers, belongs to the kids, belongs to the families. And people should be able to send their kids to public school and say, my child is going to pick to do these 3 things, but they're not going to participate in these 4 things because they're not interested. And instead, they'll do this. They'll be respectful of other people, but they're not going to spend, whatever, an hour and a half in art class because they hate art. They'd rather go and, go to the science lab. So let them go to the science lab. So we, on the unschoolingschool.com website, we have all kinds of information about why learner-directed or self-directed education works and is really the secret to happiness and long life.
And what about people then, not just children, but adults that know or have a sense, well, I should go out and learn this or I should learn that. But, are just not interested in learning. They're more interested in, not even just interest. They don't have the time because they have a family or they have a busy job or whatever. What do you say to them about how can they kind of reignite that spark for lifelong learning, lifelong growing? Because it is one of the things that, keeps you young, keeps you excited, keeps you very motivated, is learning new things and growing as a person when you're learning those new things. But especially as they've had those experiences where school wasn't necessarily great, learning wasn't necessarily great. They might have done, like you're saying, 10% of what they liked and 50% of what they didn't like to get to the 10% of what they liked. What would you say to them about some mindsets or tools that they can use to create that motivation and keep going when things may not necessarily be that great for them?
Well, you know what? I think I would say, don't worry about being a lifelong learner. Don't think, geez, I should be a lifelong learner. I should be learning something new. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. Forget that. Figure out what you're interested in. That probably doesn't take very long. What are you interested in? What would you like to be doing? What would you want to know more about? And go after that. That's what a lifelong learner is. We are all, whether we believe we are or not, there is nobody on the planet that is not a lifelong learner. If you're breathing, you're learning. So pick your lane, pick your area, and you will be becoming a lifelong learner in that area. And doesn't mean you can't, change and, learn lots of different things. But I think that's it's a false sort of idea that, I need to be a lifelong learner and I need to sit down with my books and dedicated to this. No, just, do what you're interested in, what brings you joy and what makes you feel like you're contributing, whatever it is that works for you. I think that's the right angle.
And I love how you phrased that, it's about what brings you joy, because I think that that's so, so very true. I know when I've seen some of the, in America, they have some of these shorts now about younger Gen Z people, and it's looking at their jobs and their lives and their this and their that. And one of the fascinating things for me when they've talked to some people that got in early with Fiverr or something like that was that this was, again, people that didn't necessarily fit into the system. So they started doing what they liked to do and then have created, they're multimillionaires now because they liked to write blogs, or they liked to do TikTok videos, or they liked to do this or that. And so I think that this is a great example of what we're talking about, where, they learned as they were going along. They didn't start off being a great TikTok video maker. They learned as they went. Mm-hmm. They didn't start off being a great writer for blogs. They learned as they went. And I think that this is a great example where if you focus on what you're passionate about and what you love, then the rest can follow. And it follows as well that you'll keep learning and doing the parts that you're excited about. So in your life with, family and the different things that you've been doing, and also the fact that we kind of became connected through like an international network, what do you see as some of the big trends that are happening at the moment?
Well, it does seem that there's social trends to more of these kinds of things, that younger generations are not interested in doing a job they hate for a long, long time just because that's what they're supposed to be doing. They're saying no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, we've got COVID and people aren't returning to certain kinds of work. They're choosing to move out of cities and to have sort of simpler lives. So that does seem to be, a pretty significant trend. And I hope it can translate down into other things. I mean, there's so many, there's not one right way to do anything. There's so many different ways that society can be set up, that people can choose to make a meaningful life for themselves.
I agree wholeheartedly. I know here, for example, that there's a really big push around coding and having younger kids learn coding. But if you hate coding, and that's what everybody's being pushed towards because that's the future, then it goes to the heart of what we're talking about. Instead of helping them to find what they're passionate about and like to do, it's all pushing them towards things that they don't like to do because they're being told you need to do this to get a job in the future.
Yeah, there is absolutely no point in forcing the kid to code when they really want to write or when they really want to paint or dance. I've also heard from people, on the inside of the tech world, it's like, we need coders, but we don't need everybody to be a coder. There's not that many jobs. Like there's other areas of tech and there's other areas of everything, that are in need of people. We don't have to make every single kid be a coder.
And interestingly, I work with a lot of futurists and technologists, and what they're talking about, with AI and people being replaced more and more in jobs, a lot of what we're doing is those transactional elements, which is coding. A lot of it is coding, won't exist in another 5 years, 10 years, because we'll just be talking like people talk today to Siri or Alexa. They'll be saying, change this code so it does red rather than blue or something like that on the page.
Yeah.
So in terms of educational systems, and I'm sure you've seen a number of different ones around the world, they're in the Canada and the US, and where do you see, because we in Australia, we keep seeing Nordic countries like Sweden and others being held up as great examples where what you're talking about in terms of helping the kids learn how to learn, and they do self-directed learning in many ways. They work out when they want to go to school, how many hours they want to do. Play, of course, is really important in those societies as well.
Yeah.
So is this the sort of places that you see that are doing it well and have this model set up well that other places can look at?
Well, yeah. So on the unschoolingschool.com website, we've got lots of examples of self-directed education and how it works and the places that are really doing it. I mean, there's a school outside of Boston, Massachusetts called Sudbury Valley. And I call it the mothership because it is a school that's been running for over 50 years, and it is entirely self-directed. So every day, kids between the age of 4 and 18 show up, and they do what they want all day long.
Wow.
And all the tools and resources and great things, that's library and equipment and a huge music barn, and loving, caring adults are there. And the kids make the decisions about what they're going to do, and they also run the school. They have equal voice in running the school. So it's actually run as a pure democracy. And that's the other thing that we see, voting rates are down and people aren't participating in democracy and they're not sure about it. Well, it's because they only learn about it by somebody lecturing them about the forms of the government. And that could not be more boring. But if you get to live it, then you understand it and you know what your role is within that. So there is about 500 of those kinds of schools around the world. They have different names. Israel is, I believe, one of the few countries that actually has them within the public system. Most of them are private. So I believe Israel has 30 fully self-directed democratic schools that are in the public system. There's links to that again on our website. So I would say that that's the place that as a country is doing the most of it. There is, and I wish I could remember the name. There's some links, I think, to some things that are happening in Australia too, because there's a couple of really great schools in Australia, which I just cannot think of the names right now, that are definitely going down the road of self-directed and learner-centered and letting the kids, be in charge of their time. And that,
I know Montessori, is that who you're thinking of? Montessori?
No. I mean, the original Montessori had a lot of stuff right, for sure, because it was, letting kids explore more, but it's even become a little, sort of forced and directed. We're going to put a lot of things in front of the kids and hopefully they're going to pick it up, as opposed to like a community center. So think of school instead of a prison. It is the cross between a library and a community center. And you go in, when you go to a library, they don't say, here's the book you're reading. It's Charlotte's Web. And have it back in a week with a report. Well, I'm not interested in Charlotte. I don't care. You're interested. You have to read this book. Like, that would be nuts. We've never operate libraries like that. You don't do a community center and say, you are having to take badminton. There's no other option for you. There's no swimming. There's no curling. It's badminton. It's like going to a restaurant. You are eating chicken fingers today, and that's all we're having, and you're never having anything else. So we've forgotten that school is actually a service, and that we and the kids are the customer.
I love that angle, and I think we could talk for hours more about that angle, about the customer and the service, because it's such an important change in that mindset, and it's part, I think, of that evolution that countries are seeing in terms of elections and job changes, etc., of people taking people power back. But for now, if people wanted to find out more, because this is fascinating stuff, and I'm sure many people watching have got children or know children and would like to find out more, what's the best way of connecting with you?
So either through my LinkedIn, which is Heather MacTaggart with an MAC, but you have to pick the one that's in Canada, and the one who appears to be around my age. There's a much younger woman that is also in education, but it's pretty obvious. You can also just Google me, and all kinds of stuff comes up, videos, conversations, things like that. You can get to me through the unschoolingschool.com website, but also through changeitup.ca. So it's time to change it up. And that's our initiative to train facilitators, teachers, anybody who's in the helping profession. So if you're helping people, we now have, right now it's free in the province of Alberta, but it's going to be available free across Canada, online, to help people learn how to deal with others in a way that is learner-centered, holistic, strength-based. So let's start with what's good, which is, I'm sure, part of what you do in your coaching practice, right? You start with what's good, and then you say, how do we build on that? And
it's the example for people of how they've done it well before. Exactly. Yeah. And if you were to talk to your younger self, what sort of advice might you give to your younger self?
Don't get married so young. And then you might not have had to do it so many times.
I love it. That's very funny. I haven't heard that one before. So.
But, even then, it's hard to even regret that fully, because I love my life and I love my kids. And if I didn't get married then, I might not have had those kids. So, however, I would still give that advice to a younger person.
Or a younger version of yourself.
Yeah.
So Heather, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a real pleasure having you here.
Thank you. It's been very nice chatting with you.
Thank you. And to everybody watching, thank you again for tuning in and hearing again a very different lens, a very different approach to how to create a successful mindset. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.